let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so you have to understand yourself. And we're going to talk about understanding yourself. We're also going to talk about different perspectives on trying to help other individuals. One of the things as a practitioner that you have to do, you have to realize that each person constructs reality in their own unique way. Everybody's got their own reality. My reality, of course, is 67 years in the making. I'm from Indiana. I've been in the military. I've traveled all over everywhere, it seems like. Not really. But I've met a lot of people. I've interacted with a lot of people with different ideas. I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to run into when my wife got an assignment in Mississippi. I was a little afraid of people from the South because people from the South have different ideas than people from the North, theoretically. Anyway, we didn't know what we were going to run into, but I was really surprised. Really surprised, but then again, I didn't have a lot of interaction with African Americans down there because they segregate. Everything's segregated down there, despite the fact that it's against the law, of course. So the only African Americans I had any contact with was my students. And then my students found out that I wasn't from the South. And they took me downtown and fed me, which was kind of interesting. So I went to soul food places. They used to take me to soul food places, which turned out to be the same food I'd been eating all my life. It's just poor people food. So it's the same food that my mother fed us but then again, she grew up during the Depression. And during the Depression, of course, you didn't have a whole lot of food. So everything had to be tasty so that people would consume it. So there was a lot of fat that they were dealing with. Did I make a mistake? What? Does it matter whether it's Wednesday or Monday? No, it really doesn't matter. Anyway, so I was really surprised when I went to Mississippi as to what I ran into. This is known as constructivism, the fact that everybody has their own way of thinking, their own way of looking at the world. Constructivism focuses on how individuals describe their experiences in terms of personal constructs, and that's why they call it constructivism. Of course, I've been to Japan, I've been all over Europe. I was in North Africa for a very short period of time. I've been to a lot of different places, and of course, my personal experiences have changed the way that I see the world. You're in light-colored clothes today. That's not you. Who are you? Yesterday you were in dark clothes. No, you're not. Personal construct is an explanation of an event or series of events that becomes the lens through which the individual sees the world. So if you're raised in a family where there was a lot of child abuse, then potentially this becomes your view of what the world is like. Does that make sense? So we know what the world looks like because of what we have seen. So we interpret the world through those lenses. I grew up in one place, and that's the only place I'd ever been until I went away to college. And then when I went away to college, I moved to the other side of the state, and I went to college, of course, for 4 years. I ran track, so one of the things that I saw a lot of national things. I went to Ohio, we went to Michigan, we went to Illinois. Here I am from Indiana. And we wandered all over the United States, kind of. And of course, all the time we had to run, but it was really kind of fascinating. So my lens was a little bit different. After graduating from college, I joined the military. And by golly, I'll tell you what, that really changed the world as far as I was concerned. When I went to a high school that theoretically should have been just like every other high school, but because I had no idea why, but in my class, there were a lot of really smart people, which should make it interesting when I go home to my reunion. We'll see about all these really smart people. But my parents didn't tell me how damn smart I was, and I'm not exactly sure why they didn't. I had kind of a low self-esteem because here I am competing with all these really, really bright kids, and I thought I was dumb as dirt because I wasn't as smart as they were. And as it turned out, I was a lot smarter than I thought I was. Then I went away to an elite college, and I could compete with those individuals as well, but of course I still have this low self-esteem. Got into the military and I realized I'm so much smarter than everybody else, including the people trying to tell me what to do. It was really kind of fascinating. Anyway, so I was in the military for an extended length of time. And one of the things I did in the military, and Aaron can attest to this, when I was in the military, I was an athlete, and so I got to be an athlete a lot. Despite the fact that I was supposed to be doing military things, I played a lot. I got to play a lot. I was a good softball player, as strange as that is. So I wandered all over Europe playing softball, which is a great job if you can get it. So if you're a good athlete, you're in pretty good shape. Anyway, okay, so we're talking about experiences and the way that we interpret the world. So all of a sudden I realized, well, I'm a lot smarter than these other individuals. Maybe I should go to college. Maybe I should get my graduate degree, and I did. I got two graduate degrees while I was in the military, and after I got out, I started teaching, realizing that I had a gift of something I don't know what I have. The ability to run fast. That's my, oh, we've already talked about this kind of stuff. Okay. And we talked about all of those things. Okay. Culture strongly influences words used to describe someone's personality. Unfortunately, of course, because American Indians have been denigrated since Europeans first arrived here, the words used to describe American Indians haven't been very kind. My Indian name is Drinks Like a Fish. This is a little joke. Crawling growth, of course. And those are really cruel things to say about individuals. But some individuals, of course, they have no clue who American Indians are. They don't think you guys still exist. So that's the way they think of select individuals. But if we watch Cops, and of course I talk about this all the time, if we watch Cops, we think all Hispanics shave their heads and get into trouble, and all African Americans are criminals. And of course, none of this is true. These are all stereotypes, and this is really a horrible, horrible stereotype. Minority cultures will sometimes accept the dominant culture's view of themselves as true and use that definition to evaluate themselves. As a matter of fact, I've been dealing with this for the last, 20 years or so. And one of the problems is that the white culture, the white scientific world, thinks that American Indians have a proclivity for drinking. At one point, they said that that American Indians have a select gene that makes them more addicted than other individuals. This isn't true. It's just not true. It's another part of the stereotype. It's just them feeding into this stereotype. This whole aspect isn't true at all. And of course, we can discuss other minorities and some of the other stereotypes that we have about other minorities. As a matter of fact, we can discuss stereotypes that people have about white people. There are some stereotypes out there, and one of them is that they're greedy. Well, we see a lot of rich white people, that's for damn sure. I'm not one of them, unfortunately. But we see a lot of greedy people out there, and so it is true to a minor extent. We've got a president right now that seems to be focused on making money. This is the most important aspect of life, is that we need to make sure that people make a lot of money. I was talking to my son last night. He's in Florida, and he's getting ready to bug out because I guess Irma's about to blast the state sometime this weekend. Florida's going to get buried in something, wind and rain, something. Anyway, today's Wednesday. He's going to he's going to leave tonight and try to drive north. The problem is everybody else is trying to drive north also, so we'll see how he does. He's going to keep me posted. He's got a hotel room in Mobile, Alabama, so we'll see. You know, Irma could go up the coast and just blast Mobile, but he's going to go to Mobile. We'll see what happens. Anyway. Something you don't think about. I mean, this is a hurricane, so you got to get out of the area. Otherwise, they're talking about storm surges of 7 to 12 feet. 7 to 12 feet, that's the ceiling, okay? So if I'm standing here at sea level and we have a storm surge of 12 feet, I'm underwater by about 5 feet. I can't swim, so I'm in pretty sad shape. He's thinking he'll take his surfboard just in case. Crazy kid. Anyway, I was talking to my son last night, and he said Betsy DeVos came to Florida. And she went to some of the schools in the area. She went to a charter school, she went to a private school, she went to a charter school and a private school. She didn't go to any public schools, so it looks like she's trying to close down the public schools. Really kind of fascinating, because he works in a public school. He teaches mathematics and physics, so we'll see what happens. This constructivist perspective helps practitioners. My whole point was that, yeah, the stereotype for white people is that they're greedy. But if you look at the population that's here, the white population teaching at this institution, I'm not talking about me especially, but I'm talking about everybody else. I mean, these individuals are not greedy people. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't be here. This isn't the highest wages that you can get teaching college. So, you know, they're sacrificing something. So, okay. I know we're making a living wage. I'm not talking about us not making a living wage, but of course they're not greedy at all. The constructivist perspective helps practitioners remember that the view of the world may be different from their client's view, and this is one of the things you have to remember. This is one of the things that you have to realize. You have to figure out who this person is and what their perspective of the world is. How they construct the world. What is their focus? Do they maintain any stereotypes about themselves? And of course, one of the stereotypes that I came out of high school with was that I wasn't real bright and that I was dumber than all of these other kids. And that was my stereotype. And I maintained this, and this is one of the reasons why when I joined the military, I did try to become an officer, but I didn't try very hard, because I wasn't exactly sure I could handle it. And then I realized, God, these guys are dumb as dirt. Is that what you realized too, Aaron? They're just not real bright. Some of these officers are not the smartest people in the world. Did you realize that too? I found one and I married her. She was really something else. I don't remember why I put the Jersey Shore up here. This is a cast of the Jersey Shore. They're really kind of an interesting group. It was supposed to be a reality show. Of course it wasn't. It was scripted. You know, there was nothing reality about that television show. But if you think of people from New Jersey as this group of Italian kids from Italian-American kids from New Jersey, then you're probably mistaken. And the reality is they're not all from New Jersey. This girl was adopted out of Peru, so she is genetically she's Quichua. She should be speaking Quichua. She's only 4'8". That's Snooki, I think. Isn't that her name, Snooki? Yeah, Snooki. I found her just fascinating. She's tiny now. She's lost just a ton of weight. She's had a couple kids, and I don't know what's going on with her. She's got religion or something, I don't know. Something always happens. The practitioner needs to remember to work within the client's view of reality. Their view of reality is the one that you're going to have to fix. Whether it's accurate or whether it's inaccurate, one of the things you have to do is deal within their reality. You can't deal with your reality. You can't force your reality on them. I was talking to an individual the other day, and they were telling me that one of the things that happened to them when they went to see a counselor was that they tried to convert them to their religion, which I found egregious, I mean, you can't really do that. You've got to use their reality. If religion's very important to the client, you can't try to convert them to another religion. This is their reality, and you have to deal within their own reality. So you can't convert people. Let's just say you shouldn't try to proselytize. When an individual, family, or group becomes aware of a construct that is unsatisfying or limiting, the individual can develop another meaning for events or experiences and begin to realize change is possible. One of the realities is that as we are growing up, we think as a toddler, we think as a child, we think as a pre-adolescent, we think as an adolescent, and then eventually we think as an adult. But we are interpreting the world from our age perspective. So if we are only 6 years old, we don't have the capability of thinking like an adult if you're only 6. So you have to understand that sometimes people's ideas are skewed. And the reason they're skewed is because they saw it through the eyes of a child, or they saw it through the eyes of a pre-adolescent, or they saw it through the eyes of an adolescent, which are practically totally grotesquely insane because of all the hormones running through their bodies. And this is one of the reasons why you get that rebellious phase when somebody becomes a teenager. They become rebellious because they're not exactly sure what's going on in the world. The most important thing to them are their friends, and the reason their friends are so important is because these are the iconic figures that they are supposed to look like. That's what they think anyway. So eventually, of course, all of this changes. When you become an adult, you become an individual. But before that, you're an individual that is trying to identify with all the people around you. Not the adult population, but all of your peers, all of the individuals that are in your age group. So we're seeing the world through different eyes, and these eyes are changing as we are growing up. And sometimes we get skewed ideas because we're seeing the world from a really strange point of view. So when we look back on these events, we were abused as a child. When we look back on these events, we are still seeing it from the perspective of a child. So sometimes you can reconstruct the way of looking at this. I have low self-esteem because I was molested as a child. If this is my perspective, then possibly we can revisit that episode, and you will realize what happened to me in the past shouldn't change the way that I am today. I don't need to have low self-esteem, because then I was a child. Now I'm an adult, and that's not going to happen to me now. But I should stop seeing the world through the lens of a 7-year-old child that was molested. And so we can change that. What we're actually changing is their adult perspective of what happened in the past. Unfortunately, too often, the perspective they had when they were a child continues, and they don't change it. It doesn't change. So that's one of the things we do as counselors. We try to convince them that this is the person they are today. You can put that in your past. That is in your past, and you need to reinterpret this from your current adult perspective rather than from the child's perspective. Of course, I'm sorry, yes?
So I have a question. Is it good for the child that was abused when they were small to talk about it
Yes,
today?
it is. It is, because when they talk about it, they're going to talk about it from an adult perspective. And then they're going to change, they're going to be able to change the way that they see it. It wasn't a happy experience, it wasn't a pleasant thing, but now they can see it from a different perspective. And if they never deal with it, then they're still seeing it from the perspective of a child. We see this in when we're dealing with PTSD, dealing with combat. The more you talk about it, the less it impacts you. because you're seeing it from another perspective. My brother came back from Vietnam, and he he secured our farm. He built rifle pits. He cut down trees so that he had fields of fire. I know. Wait a minute. So what he was doing was, his brain was still in Vietnam, and he felt like he needed to make sure that everything was safe. About 20 years ago, of course that was 45 years ago, about 20 years ago, he took all that out. He took out all the rifle pits. He let the trees grow because he had realized that the danger that he continually was seeing in his mind didn't really exist. But he needed to deal with it. The more you talk about it, the more you realize the past isn't the present. And it's not part of the present. So he needed to deal with it. He was only 18 when he went to Vietnam. And now he's in his 60s. So when he was in his 40s, he realized, because he wouldn't talk about it, he wouldn't deal with it. But about 20 years ago, he actually had a conversation with me about Vietnam. And after that, he tore down the rifle pits, well, he let them grow over exactly. And he stopped cutting down all the trees, so he had a field of fire. So his idea was, of course, he was going to protect the house, and from what? Well, from the Viet Cong, obviously, or the North Vietnamese, the NVA. You know, like they're going to come to Indiana to attack my brother. Anyway, now he's okay.
So when did they usually start this, the PTSD? Is it during the time when they're in military or after they come back?
Actually, while they're in the military, they're okay, because they can talk to other individuals that went through exactly the same thing. The more you deal with it, the more you talk about it, the less intrusive it is in your mind. So the more you talk about it. One of the things we know is that the people that stay in the military after their traumatic combat experiences, the longer they stayed in the military, the less serious their PTSD was. One of the problems we had in Vietnam, of course, was that we were drafting people out of high school. We were drafting them out of, after they graduated from high school, they were going overseas at 18, they were coming back at 20, and then they were taking them out of the service. They were releasing them from the rest of their military duty. So these kids were going over there at 18, they were coming back at 20, and they were being released from the military, and they had nobody to talk to. And these are the guys that really suffered from PTSD. The guys that stayed in the service had no problems whatsoever.
I think that picture the quote right there is basically what sums it all up. It's, you know, you're only confined by the walls you build yourself. And basically in the military, it's really, you become so accustomed to all these other guys who's like, oh man, you're good, you know, don't worry about it. So you don't really talk about it.
Right.
And I think what most veterans suffer from who separate from the military don't really have that kind of reassurance, I guess, or reinforcement to tell them, like, you know, hey, I'm going through the same stuff too, you know.
Okay.
So most of these guys who get out don't really have that. And on top of that too, the camaraderie just breaks apart for them. So they don't really have anyone to lean on. This is what I've seen, you know, from friends, from family, and
Sure.
it's crazy.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. This, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
We are creating our own walls.
Yeah.
I have another question.
Sure.
I'm not sure if we're getting to it, or am I too early asking this, or we already covered it. But, so the client tells us about how they were treated when they were small.
Sure.
And what's our response to them as counselors?
One of the things that you need to do, well, of course, we haven't come to that part yet.
Oh, okay.
No, that's okay. No, that's okay.
Oh.
Because one of the things that we have to do, we have to listen to what they have to say. And normally we, as counselors, all we're doing is listen. We're doing more listening than talking. But this is one of the times when you can say, that was really fairly traumatic when you were a child. How do you feel about it today? And then, of course, we're forcing them to think about whether it's still impacting them. And if it still is impacting them, then we talk about, well, you know, when you're 7 years old, You were vulnerable, and you're certainly not vulnerable today. And that mere statement, you're not vulnerable today, you're not in the same danger you were before, that can change their perspective. And so then we will talk about that. We will let them talk about that, and hopefully they will come up with a solution. Well, that's not the way it is anymore. The guy that molested me is dead. You know, he's old and infirm. I could beat the crap out of him if I wanted to. You know, that kind of thing. So they developed the idea themselves that they're no longer in danger, and that's really important. That's the most important part. It's the same with PTSD. My brother was here. He was in the middle of Indiana. There's no reason for him to fear a group of individuals. And the problem in Vietnam was they never saw these guys. They attacked at night. They didn't know who they were. The only time they saw them is if they killed them, and then they went out later and picked up the bodies. That's the only time they saw these people. They dressed in black. They were like ninjas. So they hardly ever saw these people. Usually all they saw were bullets, them shooting their weapons at them. That's all they saw. You know, so because it's jungle, they were in the heavy jungle. So he was kind of spooked. But eventually he of course read all about Vietnam, and he dealt with it, and eventually he cured himself. So his PTSD isn't bad at all. As a matter of fact, I talked to him the other day, and he was. Normally, if you had started a conversation with my brother, it would start out really slow because he didn't want to talk. But this time he's just Mr. Jabberjaw, so I couldn't shut him up. So he talked for 2.5 hours. I hardly said anything. It's normally the way it works anyway. I don't say very much. People think that I'm really easy to talk to. That means that I don't say anything. I just jabber like crazy. So you guys are suffering because nobody else will let me say anything, and here you can't shut me up. Of course, sometimes a practitioner will have to work with pair bond structures that have very different individual constructs. And when we're talking about pair bonding, we're talking about husbands and wives, we're talking about boyfriends, girlfriends, we're talking about mothers and their daughters, we're talking about fathers and their sons, fathers and their daughters, the whole thing. Pair bonding. Individuals that are bound, there are two people that are bound together in one way or another. Normally when we talk about pair bonding, of course, we're talking about husbands and wives, because that's the most normal type of pair bond. A husband may believe that a wife should stay home, and the reality is a pair bond is should be a bond of equality, but it's not always, of course. A husband may believe that a wife should stay at home and raise the children, while his wife might think that she should be able to go out to work. And of course, this was the argument in the 1950s and 1960s. Women wanted to go out and work. Husbands weren't making enough money, so wives wanted to go out, buy a new house, buy an extra car. And that was the argument of the 50s and 60s. Of course, it's not much of an argument anymore. There are as many women out there working as there are men. But once upon a time, it was rare for a mother to work outside the home. Systems theory takes into account the entire system with which an individual interacts. The system is seen as a complex entity within which interactions are as important as the individuals. So we have to look at the family structure, we have to look at the family dynamic, we have to look at all the dynamics that we're dealing with in systems theory. So it really doesn't make the family isn't the only structure that we're dealing with here. It's any system, it's any structure. It's where you work, that's a system as well, and we have to look at that as well. So if you're having problems with somebody at work, you're having problems with your boss, or you're having problems with your work, we would use systems theory in order to take a look at that, to see what was going on. All right. The family is seen as a complex entity within which interactions are as important as the individual. And it really all depends on the type of family that you come from. My family was not religious. I told you that before. We didn't go to church. which made a huge impact socially on me and my whole family. The way the rest of my family dealt with the fact that we didn't go to church and that we were somewhat socially rejected, the way they dealt with it was anytime they came in contact with anything religious, they went ahead and did it. So if, like Bible school, they had Bible school, they would just go to Bible school. They just go. They wouldn't, I don't know, they didn't adhere to these ideas, but they went anyway and pretended that they did. And that's the way the rest of my family dealt with it. Everybody dealt with it that way except me. I didn't deal with it that way. I thought it was hypocritical for me to go to Bible school. It just didn't make any sense. I didn't believe it. Why in the world would I go? This is nonsense. Why in the world am I going? And I suffered from it because of it. Because I was rejected because I wouldn't go to Bible school. There were 2 of us that didn't go. I told you I was in a class of 72, and there were 2 people out of 72 people that wouldn't go to Bible school. And there were other individuals that didn't believe in a religion. They just went because they wanted to be socially acceptable. And I thought that that was egregious. I didn't think that was right at all. And that's when I started becoming a social rebel, was when I rejected going to Bible school. As horrible as that sounds. I could have, like my brothers and sisters, I could have pretended that I believed in that stuff. I went one year, the first year, when I was in the 3rd grade I went, but I didn't go after that. And I got in trouble because, what were we doing? They were moving all these books. And so I was, I'm a big helper. So I was helping move all the books. And evidently there was one of the books was a Bible. And it was like on the bottom. And somebody knocked all the books out of my hands and said, you always have to put the Bible on top. Really? I didn't know the rules. I didn't know there was a rule about books. Who would have thought? So you have to always put your textbook on top. This is like, anyway, so I got the books knocked out of my hand. And I'm going to meet the guy that knocked the books out of my hand over the next weekend. Should be interesting. About 15 years ago, he emailed me. He wanted me to help him. He was having trouble with his wife. He was having trouble with his marriage. His wife had decided that she didn't want to have sex anymore, and he didn't know what to do. He wanted to have sex, but she didn't want to have sex, and he asked me for advice. So I told him to find a girlfriend. But I didn't really mean for him to find a girlfriend. What I wanted him to do was to think through all of his options. And then he would have to decide whether he wanted to stay with her using all these criteria, or whether he didn't really want to do that, if he didn't have that strong a feeling for her. And as it turned out, he stayed with his wife, blaming me, of course, for forcing him to think about this. So we'll see. The last time I saw him, he wouldn't shake hands. As a matter, he's one of the people I chased around the room trying to say hello to him. He wouldn't say hello to me. So we'll see what happens. I didn't really want him to find a girlfriend. I just wanted him to think about it. I was trying to force him to think about how strong his feelings were for his wife, how important his family was to him. That's what I was trying to get him to do. Anyway, it worked. He stayed with his wife, and everything's fine. So we're talking about families here. Rules are established by the family to teach what is expected or permitted by individual family members, and I'm sure your family has done exactly the same thing. They have their own rules. If you come, maybe you only eat at 6 o'clock, and if you're not there by 6 o'clock, you miss food or whatever. I don't know. All families have their own rules. The rules help regulate and stabilize how families function as a unit. And of course, do you sit down to dinner? In this case, this is the grandfather, this is the grandmother, this is the father, and he's going to serve everybody a drink. If you've ever been to Japan or been around the Japanese, you never pour your own drink, especially if it's alcohol. It has to be poured by somebody else. So if you pour your own drink, it means you're an alcoholic. So you're not really supposed to do that. As Americans, we I don't need someone to serve me, but the reality is in Japan, you never pour your own drink. So if you run out of tea, somebody pours you another cup of tea. So if you're around somebody that's Japanese, the polite thing to do is make sure that they're always fed. And what this, they have something to drink. And what this does, it forces people to deal with everyone at the table, to think about everybody at the table, to concentrate on whether they have something to drink. Up north, if you go into somebody's house, they're supposed to offer you something to drink. They're supposed to offer you water, and that's the polite thing to do, is to offer them water. And of course, if the individual is an elder, they are always served first. The elders are always served first. But you make sure that this person is taken care of. That's being a hospitable host, is making sure they're all taken care of. And that's what's happening here. This is the father of the family, and he's pouring drinks for everybody. That's his job, is to make sure that everybody's taken care of. The mother has made the meal, and the father will serve everybody all their liquids. And that's the way it works in that family. Those are the rules of that family. This, of course, is a Hispanic family. So if you go into people's houses, sometimes they have different rules than you do. Yes, ma'am?
I think for Navajo, it's like that too.
Mhm.
Feed our visitors,
Correct.
or maybe give them coffee.
Right, coffee or tea.
Yeah.
Right. You give them something. Exactly. You give them something, you give them sustenance, some sustenance. And up north, if somebody offers you food, you can't refuse
Yeah.
food. Even if you're stuffed, you can't refuse. Changing one part of the family system will result in changes to other parts. If something in the family dynamic changes, like a wife getting a job to help with the family finances, the homework distribution will have to change to even out labor, of course. Now the father's, of course, going to have to start cleaning the house or cooking or doing something. The mother can't do everything. And the children, of course, are going to have to start doing something as well. They can't just rely on the mother. So one dynamic in the family will change everything, can potentially change everything. Family systems may be open or closed in various degrees. In a closed family system, the family exists in relative isolation with communication taking place primarily between members. This isn't very common on the reservation to have a closed system. But this is very common in the white community. And the reason it's so common in the white community is because there were a lot of isolated farmers. And the isolated farmers, that's the way they did things. They did things unto themselves. The only time they left the home, the only time they left their sanctuary of their farm was on Sunday when they went to church. And that's why church was so important. It was a social event more than it was anything else. Some of these individuals, that's the only time they left their homes, especially the father and the mother, because of course they were taking care of everything. The children got to go to school, but the only time they left the farm was to go to church. In a closed system, the change is avoided. They try not to change anything. Everything has to be the same. Members hold on to established traditions and values, so they were a lot more traditional. And you can run into these groups if you go to a farming community any place around the Midwest, especially in the Midwest. Not so much in Indiana anymore, because Indiana they have really small farms, and most of them have gone by this time. But Illinois has large farms, Iowa has large farms, Nebraska has large farms, Kansas. So you can go to these areas and you will find a lot of individuals that have a closed family system. And the reason they do is because they're so far away from everything. When I was growing up, my neighbors were very social individuals. My family was fairly isolated, but their family, they not only went to church, but they also they went to a thing called Pet and Hobby, where they would meet once a week or once a month, I don't know when they met. And they would talk about their hobbies, and they would bring over their pets. You know, it was Pet and Hobby, so it was just a social gathering. Another social thing that they did, they were a member of a pinochle club. No, that's not right. Euchre club. Euchre. If you guys have never heard of Euchre, it's just a 24 card game that's like half pinochle. No, it's not important. It's a game from England, as odd as that seems. So people of English and Scottish ancestry, they played this strange game called Euchre, which sounds French, but it's really an English game, as odd as that sounds. So, you know, I grew up playing Euchre, as odd as that sounds. But they were in a club. They were actually in a club. Isolated families, and that's one of the ways that they weren't as isolated as they were before. Characteristics of an open family system: willingness to assimilate new information and to engage in ongoing interactions with their environment. The family has no single correct way of doing things. So today you'll have supper at 5 o'clock, tomorrow it'll be at 8 o'clock at night. You know, there's no set time. As the family matures, changes are tolerated, supported, and celebrated. This is an Indian family, of course, Asian Indian family. This is a Bollywood dance. You know, I don't know if you've ever watched one of these movies. They're really quite interesting. But the idea in this movie is that she's got a baby, but she's not married. Ooh, something really taboo in that part of the world. Having a child that has no father, official father, no married father. In the family system perspective, practitioners gain an understanding of how interactions within the family system affects their clients. And of course, in order for this to take place, the entire family has to come in so that the counselor can talk to them. Sometimes you'll have a situation where the father is dominant, and so he will not come in with the family. And a lot of times he's the problem. He's the problem, or maybe it's the mother. Maybe the mother is too controlling, and so you can't get her to come in. I have a niece that has a mental illness. And when she first started seeing a counselor, the counselor decided that part of her problem was her mother, because her mother was so controlling. So the counselor asked the mother to come in with her daughter, and she refused. As a matter of fact, she dropped that counselor and went to another one. And they bounced from one counselor to the other until they could find one that didn't blame everything on the mother. Okay, anyway, it's the mother's fault. I know it's the mother's fault. I told her that from the very beginning. Oh, man. Family systems assist. This is my brother's wife. There's something wrong with that lady, I swear. I've been a psychologist since 1976, and I saw it in 1976, I'll tell you. And she's ruined her daughter, and now she's ruined her granddaughter, now she's got her great-grandson. We'll see what happens with him. She doesn't handle males very well. She hates males. So we'll see what she does to the grandchild, the grandson. Wow. Like an experiment. We'll see if she could screw him up as much as she screwed up all of her female offspring. Family systems assist clients in identifying reciprocal relationships between their behavior and influences of the systems within which they interact. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about the dynamic between husband and wife. Husband and wife, we're talking about fathers and daughters, or fathers and mothers and whatnot. It's really kind of interesting. Sometimes you'll talk to somebody about their family, and they will talk about their father, they'll talk about their father, and then they'll never mention their mother. And so the question is, what does that mean? Does that mean that the mother's the problem, or does that mean that the mother's no problem whatsoever, so they're not talking about it? Well, this is one of the things you have to discover. Is the father so dominant that the mother has become a shadow person? as far as this child is concerned? The mother's not important? Or is it the fact that they're not saying anything about the mother because the mother's the real problem? And this is one of the things that you have to find out. Just because they're not mentioning somebody doesn't mean that that somebody's not important. Sometimes they're the most important thing, and that's the reason they're not saying anything about it. So, yeah. This gets really fascinating. So the trick is to figure out where the problem is. And sometimes it's the person they're not talking about, and sometimes it's the person that they talk about the most. So you have to read what's going on in the family. Clients realize both how someone else's behavior is influencing them and how their behavior is influencing others. Normally this, if you're a dominant individual, you don't realize how much impact things have on you. It's just like if you're an attractive person, you don't realize that being attractive is is impacting what's happening to you. If you're a great athlete, you think that everybody gets treated exactly the same. Just like I do. I realize that I get things, but it's not that much. If I'm really tall, does my height have anything to do with the way that people treat me? Does everybody get treated exactly the same? Do males get treated exactly the same as females?
No.
Who's treated better, males or females? If I go into a store, if we go into a store, who are they going to treat better, you or me?
Me.
The female, probably. Probably. Do you think about that? Do you think I'm going to go into a store, they're going to treat me really well, but if Bradway goes in there, they're going to treat him like shit? Is that what you think?
It just depends on who's serving you, I think.
That's it. Well,
Because girls
yes.
are mean to girls, I think. That's what I
Potentially, yes and no. I'm too old for anybody to flirt with, so it really doesn't matter. I'm like a non-entity at this stage. I'm an old fart, so they're not going to treat me like a male or a female. They're just going to treat me well. But they're going to treat you well because you're a female. I used to have this problem. I used to talk to my wife about Havre, Montana. Is the most racist place in the world, and they're not racist against anybody except natives, because there aren't any African Americans up there. There's no Hispanics. There's only Native Americans and there's white people, and most of the town of Havre are white, and they treat natives really badly. They have signs in their windows that say Canadians are welcome. They don't have any signs in their windows that say natives are welcome. Havre is in between two reservations. It's in between Rocky Boy and Fort Belknap. So when I went to town, they treat some people badly. And I was one of the people that they treated badly because I'm a male, for one reason. And for another thing, I used to wear Fort Belknap t-shirts all the time. Yeah, okay. So they treated me kind of bad. But my wife, they treated her like a princess. And when I told my wife this, she didn't believe me. But then again, my wife was a colonel. And when she was in the military, everybody treated her like she was golden. But then again, she had the bird on her shoulder. So yeah, everybody treated her really well. She was in charge. So she's used to that kind of treatment. I was enlisted. They didn't treat me that way. I can assure you that they didn't treat me that way. Anyway, so it was really hard for me to convince my wife that people in Havre were mean because they treated her like a princess. Anyway, as sad as that is, they treated me like crap. I'd go into a store and I'd have to chase people down. I mean, I'd be chasing people in the aisles trying to catch them to get them to help me. It was that bad. My wife would go in and, there's like 5 people trying to help her. I'd go in and I'd have to chase people in the aisles to get people to help. Yes, I'm an ugly old man. I don't know if that had anything to do with it or not. The ecological perspective views people and their environment as continuously evolving. The ecological perspective is less concerned with cause and effect and more concerned with the transactions that occur between people and their environments. And of course, that's what I was just talking about, how they treated me in that environment. So this was very important. I felt like I was being discriminated against. I was stopped, my car was stopped several times for one thing or another. Never got a ticket, but they always stopped me. And one of the reasons they stopped me was because, for one thing, I had a Fort Belknap College license plate. And the other thing is I had a dream catcher in the back and hanging off my mirror. I still do. Same dream catcher, actually. And so they thought I was native, and then they'd stop me and they'd see that I wasn't native, and they'd say, well, I'm just going to give you a warning this time. What was I doing wrong? Well, you're going a little fast. You went through that construction area faster than you should have. Oh, okay. Thanks. Anyway, that's, so we're talking about the transaction between individuals and their environment, and sometimes the environment doesn't treat people the same. Ecological perspective was derived from the concept of biological ecology. This structure enables practitioners and clients to think about the reciprocal relationship between people and their environment. Is your environment nurturing to you, or is it destructive? If you're going to a high school, if we're dealing with an individual going to high school, is the high school environment toxic for this individual, or is it nurturing for them? And if it's toxic, maybe they need to change schools. That happens sometimes. Are you being bullied in this environment? Is this environment giving you what you need for, as far as education is concerned? If we change schools, if we change environments, will that help you? If you're one of those individuals that that's a city person, then that environment is probably nurturing for you. I have a niece that lives in Chicago. She lives on the 42nd floor. I know. I live on the second floor. I can't imagine. I live in the middle of a cornfield back in Iowa. And this lady lives in the middle of Chicago on the 42nd floor of an apartment building. She owns the apartment in this building. I know. And I'm going to see her this weekend. She's running a half marathon in Muncie, so she's going to be visiting, so I'll get to see her. I'll give you the whole lowdown of how things are going with her. She just changed high school. She's a high school English teacher. Ecological perspective has three important components: person-environment fit, adaptations, and life stressors that we get from these environments. The person-environment fit refers to how well a person's needs, goals, and rights mesh with the social and physical environment. Of course, I could never live in a city, and I've had to live in cities from time to time. We were stationed in Southern California. My wife was working at the RAND Corporation in Santa Monica. And if you know anything about Southern California, there's like 50 million people within 17 miles of the middle of Los Angeles. That's a lot of people, if you think about it. So Santa Monica, of course, is right on the coast. So in order to get to Santa Monica, you have to go through all of these people. So we were living in the valley. I'm sure you've heard that term, the valley. What is the valley? Well, Los Angeles is in one valley, and then the valley is the next valley. I think it's the Antelope Valley or something. And then there's another valley on the other side of that. So we lived over the mountain in the valley. But it was still the city, and there were still a lot of people there. So I wasn't a person, my person-environment fit was very poor, because I don't like people. I like you guys, but I don't like, a lot of people all stuck together in one place. I had a neighbor that he had parties all the time, and the police would come and bust the parties. And of course, they're playing music at a very loud level. Everybody's laughing, and screaming. People are coming up to my window and knocking on my window. Why? I don't know. It was weird. So it's like 2 o'clock in the morning and somebody's banging on my window. Of course, there's a party next door. So adaptations are the processes people use to sustain or increase the level of fit between themselves and the environment. That's the adaptations. So you need to adapt to your environment. Where's that? There it is. You need to adapt to your environment. And if you can adapt, if your adaptations are incomplete, then potentially we need to change environments. If you can adapt to that environment. One of the things that we saw in the military is that you have to adapt to wherever you are. I had a friend that was from Los Angeles, and we were in Lubbock, Texas, and I don't know if you've ever been to Lubbock, Texas, but it's out in the middle of nowhere. It's 200 miles from everywhere. It's a city in the middle of the prairie. It's up on top of the Llano Estacado, the staked plain. The Comanches used to race from one end of this area to one other. It's like 50 miles. Anyway, that's where Lubbock is, and he was miserable. He did not adapt well to his environment, despite the fact that all military people are the same. Yeah, he was a city boy, and he had a really hard time adapting to that environment. I had no problem at all, because I was born on a farm, and it's mostly ranches around there. They grow a lot of cotton, they grow a lot of sorghum. So, I'm right in my element. I had a field right behind my house, and I'm going, oh, this is great. But of course, he was just appalled because the people were so far apart and everything was so spread out. Anyway, he didn't adapt well to that environment. Life stressors are issues that exceed the resources of an individual to deal with them. And of course, I've talked about some of the stressors of living in a city for people that from a rural environment. Sometimes you just do not fit the environment that you're in. And this causes life stressors. If I were a city person, being not near people would be a life stressor. And I was afraid that was what happened with my wife. I married her without having that conversation with her. And I wasn't exactly sure how she would adapt to my rural mentality, but I was lucky. She has the same ideas that I do. As a matter of fact, she loves living out in the middle of a cornfield, as far as that goes. In the ecological perspective, behaviors are not seen as dysfunctional or maladaptive. You just haven't adapted to your environment. It's not that you're dysfunctional. We don't want to change the individual. We want to get them to adapt to their environment. Instead, behavior is viewed as adaptations to improve the fit between the individual and the environment. And of course, we would give them tasks to perform to potentially be able to handle their environment. And I have no idea. Okay, I'm good. 9:53 is what I've got. Is that close? Okay. All right, thanks. Okay, now we're going to talk about some of the perspectives that we have. One of the perspectives that we utilize, and this is especially true of social work. Social work focuses on people's strengths. One of the things that I can tell you from teaching in a program where I had to support the psychology program as well as the social work program was that there's a lot of similarity between the two. The reality is that if you talk to a psychologist about social work, they'll tell you it's completely different. These people aren't the same as we are. Their educational structure is different. It's sociology instead of psychology. But the reality is there's a lot of similarities between the two. And I've taught in both areas, and I can tell you this book supports two ideas. It supports both these psychological counseling, and this is very much the way that social workers are taught to counsel. What this book is actually, I would say that it's more social work than it is psychology. But the reality is there's a lot of similarities between the two. And it's a ridiculous argument going on between social workers and psychologists. Psychologists will tell you that social workers don't do very good research. It's not very rigorous, but the reality is research is research, right? Okay. So when I wrote my dissertation, about a third of the research that I was using was actually social work research, as appalling as that is to a psychologist. I have run into psychologists that would not accept a piece of research from another discipline, as stupid as that is. About a third of it was from psychology, and about a third of the research was from nursing. So I utilized any good idea I could find. Social work has good ideas. So this is primarily the social work way of looking at the world. So what social workers will do is they will look at strengths. They're trying to figure out what strengths this select individual has, and so that they can support those strengths. They can talk about those strengths. So if you're talking about me, when I was in college, I had a relatively low self-esteem because I thought I was dumb. I didn't think I was smart. But that was one of my strengths. My intelligence was one of my strengths, but it was one that I didn't recognize. At this point, I didn't recognize it because I hadn't been around military people yet. So one of the things, the strength perspective is that we focus on an individual's strengths. We focus on the assets clients have developed throughout their lives. And of course, people do have strengths, but they don't, a lot of times they don't recognize them. So your job is to figure out what those strengths are. A strength is defined as any psychological process that enables a person to think and act in order to benefit himself or herself and society. That is a strength. Strengths are often developed when people struggle with difficulties, traumas, oppression, disappointments, and adversity. So how do you deal with this? Okay. Once you have to deal with an adversity, you develop a strength. How did you deal with it? Did you start crying and crawl up into the corner until it went away? Were you in denial? Well, that's not a strength. But if you handled it, if you faced your problem and dealt with it, then that is a strength. And most people, of course, will deal with the problem because the problem is certainly not going to go away. So they will deal with their problems. And at that stage, of course, you develop strengths. This is a cool picture. This is a tree that it's washed out underneath. But the tree hasn't fallen down. Its roots on each side have held on, and it's still upright. As a neat picture as that is. Anyway, everyone has the capacity to develop new resources, to make positive changes, and to use his or her competencies to solve problems. And of course, if this is the way you were raised, to face your problems and to deal with them, then you develop strengths in your youth. But some individuals are raised not to deal with their problems. And this is a bit of a problem with the way we're treating children today. Are we teaching our children how to compete? Or are we teaching our children that there is no competition, that you're always a winner? And if we're teaching them that, how in the world are they ever going to be able to go out and face the competition of reality and be able to function? If we give everybody a trophy, do they recognize what adversity is? If we take away all their adversity, they never develop strengths. And this is one of the things that I worry about. This is what happened to my niece. Her mother, if anything was in her way, her mother moved it out of her way so that she would have no adversity. So she lived her life in a very special world. In a very special world where everything was taken care of for her. So when adversity struck, when something happened to her that was negative, she couldn't handle it because she'd never handled adversity in her life. And she has never handled adversity. She's 45 years old, 46 years old, and she's never held down a job. She can't hold down a job. She can't deal with the stress of the job because she's never had to in her life. And that's the way her mother raised her. So then her grandchild came along, and she did exactly the same thing with the grandchild. And now that grandchild has never been able to do anything. So the grandchild got into drugs, and so it got ugly after that. She's the one that was shooting up with heroin while she was pregnant.
So if it comes to that terms, how's she dealing with her grandchild in that situation? I mean, the grandchild is doing drugs, or the daughter?
The grandchild is doing drugs.
So how does the grandmother
deal with that?
Deal with that.
So she was cooking meth in the bathtub in her house, and they just let her do it. And then she got arrested, and because she's so special, she has a mental illness as well. She's bipolar. Because of that, they didn't arrest her. They didn't incarcerate her, let me say that. They did arrest her, but she got her released almost right away. She's never really had to deal with it. So what did they do with the house where they were cooking meth? They tore it down. My brother bought a house for his daughter, and the granddaughter was cooking meth in the house. Of course, that contaminates the entire house. But they tore it down, and they charged my brother to tear it down. Demolition costs. Cost $8,000 for my brother to tear down a house. And now the lot is contaminated because they put meth on it. So they can't build another house there. So he owns a piece of property that isn't worth anything, as funny as that is. So you think, oh, so they must have really punished that girl for, no, they didn't punish her at all. No, oh, it's okay, it's okay. Yeah, this cost us $8,000. The house cost, I don't know, $30,000 or something. Anyway, it's just all money down the toilet. Yeah. So they've never taught them to deal with adversity, and they never have. So we'll see what happens next. And now we have a great-grandchild that started out his life addicted to heroin. He almost died. It took him 6 weeks to get off this stuff. So what are we talking about? We're talking about strengths. This is not a family of strengths. I raised my children to be strong, to be independent. That's the way I wanted my children to be. Of course, I was in the military at the time, and I was a single parent, so I pretty much taught them that they had to take care of them. They had to learn to take care of themselves, that they couldn't rely on me. And so when they graduated from high school, they went to college, and then they just took off. They just went wherever they needed to go to do whatever they needed to do. They didn't have to be with me. I wasn't there. They didn't need me to protect them. I wasn't their strength. Their strength was in themselves. So what I did, I developed strengths in my children. And she didn't develop strengths in her child. And now, of course, she's still dependent on her mother at 45. My son called me last night. He's in Fort Myers, Florida. Of course, he's bugging out today. He teaches high school in a relatively violent area. Of course, my son's 5'8". He's really tall. He's 5'8", but he's a bodybuilder, so he's got big muscles and whatnot. Anyway, he can take care of himself, and the reason he lifts weights is because he's not a very big person, and so that's his strength is one of his strengths. He uses his physical strength to intimidate people so that they leave him alone, which is he never punches anybody, never has to. Okay, so we're talking about strengths here, developing strengths. Strengths perspective invites clients to discover, think about, and figure out how to use their strengths. This is different from traditional counseling because they tend to identify deficits, weaknesses, and problems. So when somebody comes in, one of the things that we do is we try to figure out what's wrong with people. And in strengths perspective, what we do is we identify all their strengths, which is a lot more positive. And this is one form of positive psychology. Positive psychology teaches you all the positive things about your life. And we accentuate the positive and we eliminate the negative, whatever that it happens to be. The advantages of strength perspective when working with individuals, families, groups, or organizations, the practitioner looks for their strengths, identifies their resources, and invites them to focus on possibilities for the future. And actually, this is the way they do it in social work. They identify their strengths and they try to accentuate those strengths. So you can do it with an individual, but you can also do it with a family, with a group, or with an organization. Identify their strengths. So if we identified the strengths of Dene College, what would it be? What would the strengths of this institution be? Are there any strengths to this institution? There must be.
The Navajo philosophy?
The Navajo philosophy, SNBH, I think is what people keep talking about. Yeah, yeah, that's the strength. That is the strength. But we're also going to give you a good background in whatever it is that we're teaching you, in this case, in psychology. So that, and hopefully when you graduate with your BA from here, you'll be able to take that BA to Arizona or to Arizona State or to Stanford or Chicago or Harvard or Yale, and you'll be able to make it in their graduate program. That is our goal. And that should be one of our strengths. If we can give you that information, that's the information we're hoping to impart to you. We're trying to give you enough background so that you can be successful at the next level. That's our job. We'll see how we do. Resilience is the ability to survive. Oh, so another perspective is resilience. And this is another positive psychology, aspect of positive psychology. Resilience is the ability to survive and thrive in the face of overwhelming life challenges. We talked about strengths and how they come, very often they come from adversity, but sometimes they don't. They don't have to come from adversity. But resilience does. Resilience always comes from dealing with a traumatic situation. Resilience is a dynamic process that is the outcome of positive adaptation in the face of adversity, stress, or some other risk. And this is what the military teaches you. They teach you resilience. And the reason they teach you resilience is because your job is to stand up there and let people shoot at you. That's your job, is to be shot at. And so if people shoot at you, and that's a very traumatic situation, and you survive, they want you to do it again. And then they want you to do it again. And then they want you to do it again. So they teach you to handle adversity, to handle whatever the adversity is. And that's what I'm sorry that I talk about the military all the time. I'll try to talk about other things, other more interesting things. The military is not that interesting, I guess. Resilience is not a fixed personality trait or an inborn characteristic. Sometimes it is. Sometimes we are born with this. Sometimes our strength, our resilience comes from something within us. We come from a resilient family. We see it in our ancestors. We can learn it from other individuals. We are taught that. I try to teach my children resilience. Deal with your situation. And usually they can. Except my daughter. I don't know. Romance. I don't understand romance at all. But this one individual that she's dealing with, she knuckles under to this guy. This guy, he seems to be a Svengali, and he can hypnotize her. And she almost knuckled under this summer. And we had to keep building her up in order to get her to fight this guy. We just wanted her to fight. I didn't care if she lost. I just wanted her to fight for her child. She wasn't going to lose the kid. What she was going to have to do was live in Florida. He tried to make her stay in Florida. Anyway. And she believed everything this jackass told her. And I kept telling her, this guy's full of bananas. I didn't use the term bananas, but he was certainly full of it. No one is either vulnerable or resilient all the time. Some of us full. And I'll tell you what, my daughter is the toughest lady you'll ever want to meet, except when she comes in contact with this jackass. And then she's just soft as putty. It was terrible.
Ugly.
God, it was nasty. This girl, that she can take on the whole, and she did. When she was in the Air Force, when she wasn't in the Air Force, she was working for the Air Force, she used to handle everybody. And they'd come in and get, oh, I can't do this. You know, she was an exercise physiologist. And they would say, oh, I can't do that today, my leg hurts. And she'd just, she'd scream at it. She was a weightlifting coach at ASU. And when she was there, the year that she was there, this is the year that ASU came in second in the nation. Because she's this little 4'11" girl, and she's got, you know, this 7 feet guys that weigh 300 pounds coming in, you know. And she's telling him, you get down there and you do that lift, and you do it right now. That's how tough this chick is. She's really, really tough. She can handle a whole football team. But she couldn't handle this one guy. I mean, that just... Resilience is learned behaviors and patterns of adaptation. Of course, I taught her how to be resilient when she was young. Resilience depends on the availability of protective factors. I'm going to tell you a story, and this is a really sad story. How much time do I have? How am I doing?
10:19, yours.
I got a minute. Okay, this is my story. Once upon a, you know, I didn't go to church, but I wanted to let my kids go to church if they wanted to go. So I had a neighbor that wanted to take my kids to church. This is when I was a single parent. My son was 2, so my daughter was about 4.5, 5 years old. Okay. So these guys are going to take her to church. They were our next door neighbors. Both the mother and the father had red hair. Doesn't have anything to do with anything, but I don't know. I don't know if I trust people with red hair after this. Anyway, so they took him to church. Well, I was a medic. And I got called out. I was on call that night, and I got called out. Fragile diabetic. You got to run to the hospital. You got to do all these glucoses just to make sure that we save this person's life. So I ran to the hospital, saved the person's life. You know, I'm the hero. I'm the hero. So it was like 9 o'clock at night. And so I started driving home, and here are my kids walking along the sidewalk. My 4.5-year-old daughter, my 5-year-old daughter, I guess, and my 2.5-year-old son are walking along the sidewalk. Well, my house is about a mile away from where they were. They had walked from my house to here. Now, these people had told me that they were going to take care of my kids. This is why I don't like religion. They told me that they were going to take care of my kids. But as soon as church was over with, they just told them to go home. Well, they couldn't get in the house because the door was locked, of course. Roxy had a key, but it didn't always work. You know, it's one of those kind of deals. So what did this little 5-year-old girl do? She decided that she was going to take her brother, and she was going to find me at the hospital. She knew where I was. I was on call. I had to be at the hospital. So she started walking to the hospital, and they walked all the way through. They cleared through the gate. A 5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old cleared through the gate. The SPs didn't stop them, and they were on base. They were on base. They were almost to the hospital. They almost made it to the hospital. I felt like, well, you know what I felt like. I felt like really bad. I felt really bad, but resilience. The kid figured out what was going on, and she said, "Dad, they told us to go home, and when I couldn't get in the house, I started beating on the windows, and I could see them in there, and they just ignored me." I know, I put a children. Anyway, it's the last time I let my kids go to church. God, good Christians.
What's happening now?
Everything worked out in the end, but why didn't they take care of my kids? They're children, they're 2.5. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time. It's time to go anyway. I'll see you guys next time. And I'll stop complaining about church.